Alright, I've just arrived at this place. Garage door is open, and we've got a project car happening here. It's called Skunk Works, and here's the two leaders of the pack.
Hello. G'day.
So it's all yours, boys.
Okay, jump into it, shall we? Yeah. So today we're going to have a look at getting the intake manifold fitted, but before we can do that, we need to finish up the wiring for the two auxiliary sensors underneath the manifold. But the one that you saw us put in one of the early videos, I accidentally, someone may have seen it, put the oil temp sensor in the coolant temp and swap them around. So fix that quickly. We've got a little block we're going to put in to have the oil pressure sensor factory one in, and then a banjo bolt, and then we're going to put the aftermarket oil temp sensor in there and a little cap screw just to finish it so it's blocked. And then we can do the two coolant lines for the heater core and test fit the manifold, and we should just be able to bolt that all down. So we'll get into it. So we've just done the little adapter kit that we got from Beamer World. We've got the factory oil pressure sensor, it's just a 1-pin sensor. And then we've got the Vito oil pressure gauge sender, and that's just MPT fitting going in, and we just put a bit of thread sealer on the plug and put that in for there, so you could run like a oil pressure sensor as well if you wanted to, or another oil temp sensor for an aftermarket ECU or whatever. We've got new copper washers on either side of the banjo bolt, which is now on the ground. And then we are going to put this into the block. So we had another one we were looking at as well, but it didn't fit so well because it was an S54 one, which we had for another car. So we just want to make sure that's not touching anything and it's moving freely, because if it's touching anything, won't seat properly. So when it's there,
I think it's probably going to have to face straight down, right?
Yeah, that's good because it keeps it out of the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not touching anything now, which is nice. Like right there actually is quite nice because it starts to touch anything, and it's not touching the banjo, it's out of the way of the banjo too. That looks like 17, could be wrong. But it wasn't. And we're not going stupid tight because we're not holding anything really in, we're just kind of securing the copper washers. And then now that that's tightened up, we can tighten up the factory oil pressure sensor. And I'm just putting a bit of back pressure on the plate itself just so that it's not like using all my torque from the wrench to hold that in position. Okay, cool. And then, as we do with anything that we're worried about rattling, and on an engine obviously things rattle, we mark the bolt so that we know if anything starts to come loose, because the paint marks will be in a different spot. Cool, now we'll do the same with the coolant one.
The coolant one is going to go in the hole where we put the oil one last time.
Yeah.
So basically we've moved that unit to there and done it properly this time.
And the only difference between the two senders was the oil pressure one and the oil temp one and the water temp one was that the oil temp one goes from 50 to 150 degrees, whereas the water temp one goes from 0 to 120 degrees. So different temperature ranges, which is just a different ohm reading that it's getting for the grounding signal. So it's not like it wouldn't have worked, it would have just had the wrong ratio that it was looking for. So it would have read low, or high in this case. I'm just removing that paint mark because with a bit of acetone, so that it's not confusing when you look under the manifold. Okay, and that should be a 19. And we're going in, it's not a 19, it's a 19. And we've just got to remember we're using an aluminium fitting in an aluminium head, so be very careful. We're not going to go tight, but I am going to leave that spanner there so that when I try to tighten this one, I'm not wrenching on the head. I'm just going to do the same thing, little dot, a thread sealer up the thread. It's kind of one of those things where like, it's not like Loctite where if you put too much it's going to be impossible to get out. It's kind of just like a goo that seals it up, but if you put too much on there, it's going to go everywhere. And that's not pretty. There we go. And same thing, it's MPT, so as it threads in, it gets tighter. I'm just using the 18 to hold that fitting in place so that I'm not cranking the adapter fitting further into the head, because we don't need to do that. And just make sure that's happy. I'm happy with that.
Oh.
Bit of leftover acetone on there, so it's not too happy about putting pen on it. That's okay.
That's alright.
Cool, so now we can make a couple of coolant lines and
Cool.
go from there. We can quickly talk about the coolant lines. So the coolant lines we're going to use for the heater core, you kind of have to find something that just fits for your application. What we've found for the M52 swap in an E30 is you can use, so you zoom in on those part numbers if you want to find them, but we just got them at Repco. And
Yeah, they're backwards.
yeah.
Nice.
So first one is off a Holden Commodore VL, and this one is off a Commodore as well, 2004 5.7 V8. And what we can do is find, using these, which one goes where and where it kind of sits, and cut the hose to make it work. So probably time lapse it while we work it out.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. We've also got Gazza,
Second filmer.
second filmer, and
Yes.
Gazza in the shop today. He's
Foillabs.com.
Yeah.
From a marine background.
quick
Automotive.
promotion.
Yeah.
Link will be in the description.
Yeah, link will be in the description. Foil Labs in the Skunkworks garage. Leavin, you can't hide behind all of these sumps. Leavin, where are you going? Leavin, come back. Talk to me about what happened.
So the hose we showed earlier, this is one of them. Can't remember what one. That was joined there. The whole point of it is you kind of got to play around with it and see where, oh, it wasn't like that actually, it was like that. Where it best fits. So we pretty much just sat there for a while and moved it around back and forth trying to work out what angle is best fit. And for my own recollection, I can never remember what one of these hose goes to where, because obviously you have the hot water coming out of the top of the head and the colder water coming back into the block on the hard line. So for when you need to do it, hot comes out of the head and goes to the bottom, top hose goes into there, and that's very handy for me also because I can just look back at this video and be like, that goes there. So we decided that this one fit best here, and the reason I cut it on the angle is because you can bend them straight a little bit and manipulate them a little bit, but it just gives us a little bit extra length which we're going to need to get all the way onto there. So we can jump to a time lapse now of us. I'll quickly show you this one as well. This is the one Gary worked out, hey? Yes, we've cut that one down a bit, and then that one will go up to that top one there. But we'll show you once we cut it because it'll make way more sense. So we'll jump to a time lapse of us installing these hoses.
done the hoses. All hose clamped on and cut in place. This one sits a little bit high, but we kind of want the manifold to push it down rather than us cutting it too short and kinking the hose, because that's going to be a bigger issue later. If we leave it a little bit high like this and it pushes down, it can still flow quite nicely. So that's kind of the setup we've gone for there. We're just going to run the wiring for the oil and coolant sensors and heat wrap them, and then we're just going to run the wiring around, up, and leave them hanging over there so we can get the manifold on, and then that means we can finish the wiring. Well, Luke can finish the wiring.
Once I find the things I need.
Yeah. Alright, we'll be back. Okay, so we ran the wires. We've gone green for oil and blue for coolant. The reason for that is we're going to be running BMW coolant, which is blue, so it's kind of a good reminder for us that just in case we forget when we're in the car and we're wiring up the gauges that, yeah, coolant is blue, oil green. And we've just incorporated that into our wiring loom here, so they both bridge into a heat wrap, which runs along the wiring loom, and then we've tucked it under the brake booster, and it goes through the firewall just underneath the fuse box. Thank you, Lukey. Just goes through the little hole there that you can see, and at the moment we just have the wires free sitting in the footwell after coming out of there, and we'll wire them in when we do the interior. So now we can go about putting the manifold on and doing the rest of the wiring.
Sweet.
So this is the M52 manifold that we're going to be chucking on. We just gave it a quick wipe down, and now Luke is putting on the new seals. And we've just removed a couple of the hoses that we're going to be replacing or don't need, and also removed the old seals. Basically just giving it a quick refresh before we mount it in the car.
Alright, so Harry and I finished the manifold. We're all bolted down and hooked up the rest of the wiring harness. So all we really need to do now is hook up, we're going to put the injectors in, hook up those, and then finish off the wiring. And that should be your day.
Pretty much.
Oh, front fuel lines, but that's like just from the body upwards, so that should be good.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so what should we look at next? We'll probably look at finishing up the wiring, so we'll jump into that.